So we really appreciate you coming out to listen to 4 women who are apparently quite dangerous. I didn't realise this, but there we go. I'm Joan Smith. Some of you will know my work. I've been a feminist since I was about 7 years old. And my second job in journalism happened to be in the north of England during what was called the Yorkshire Ripper murders. And I found myself at a very young age covering this absolutely horrendous case of murders and attacks of women in... I was working in Manchester. There were 2 murders there. The rest were in Leeds, Bradford, and so on, Halifax. And covering those was kind of the shock of my life, because I was actually exposed to sort of the misogyny of the police, which is now a subject I write about every single year, it seems, and also the misogyny of the culture that could produce someone like that. And so I didn't intend this to be my career, but misogyny seems to be the subject that I'm most associated with. And I wanted to say at the beginning of this that I'm really grateful to you for coming here tonight, because I think this is the worst period of misogyny that I can remember since back in the 1970s. And I think this time it's much more overt. I think there is an ideology here which, from my point of view, is unscientific nonsense. But I think not only have some people who are quite disturbed and vulnerable gone along with it, but I think it's actually empowered men who really hate women, and it's given them an opportunity to lie about us, to say terrible things about us, to accuse us of all sorts of things. I wrote a piece earlier this week about the kind of lies that have been told about our speakers tonight. And what really upsets me about this is that there are things that are incredibly important that we could be talking about. So until a couple of years ago, I was an advisor to the Mayor of London about violence against women and girls, until I started giving City Hall advice it didn't like, such as, you have to protect single-sex spaces, you have to make sure that the refuges, which are part funded by City Hall, are able to exclude male-bodied people, because the women who get into refuges are very vulnerable. And I also suggested that the mayor should call for an inquiry into misogyny in the police, but particularly in the Metropolitan Police. And I met a lot of resistance, and of course I was sacked shortly after that. And we're now in a state in London where 1 in 40 police officers in the Metropolitan Police are under investigation, many of them for sexual and domestic violence. And it's absolutely clear to me that we have a huge problem with the whole criminal justice system. I mean, Joe Phoenix knows this better than I do, that we have a problem with failure to investigate women's complaints properly, failure to go to court, failure to convict rapists who then become serial rapists, serial domestic abusers. And at the same time, there is not a proper mechanism for identifying predators who join police forces. It's a huge problem, and at the same time we're having to deal with this subject, this whole subject of women being told to shut up, that we can't speak. So I'm very, very grateful to you all for coming tonight to hear our speakers, and I asked them to write their own little biographies, because I think it's always very revealing when people tell you what they want to say about themselves. So